First was this myth, oh, with summer heat, it will all disappear, no?
Right.
Then it was some quick vaccine, we will find it. Then it was this herd immunity, oh, just a couple of months, then we are safe, you know.
Right.
But now we are even discovering that even if you survive it, you know,
right.
you're not fully fit like before. It can leave traces on your lungs, in your system, and so on, you know.
Right.
Of course, there are many people who got it and even don't know that they went through it. But it's not a clear picture. But sorry, I'm taking your time, please, because I will, before I start.
No, it's interesting, you know, and I think it's interesting how we all feel taboo to even question whether this had a relationship to a lab. I have no idea. But why do we feel taboo to say that? Why are we afraid to say that it could have had some kind of origin related to what they call gain of function laboratory work, where they take natural viruses and they try to see? Why is that considered taboo to say that? You know what I mean? Why do we all feel a little scared, like, oh, I don't want to be considered?
I know. Yeah. I know, because also even in China, the idea is not that they left it in purpose among the population, but simply that something went wrong in the lab. No, that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Why? But yet even
you know
that is.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
But even that seems to be considered, again, a taboo thing to raise. The idea that someone's trying to do a gain of function experiment, taking a natural coronavirus from bat population, trying to see if they can make it more infectious or more deadly, and then trying to find out how to overcome that. The idea that that could have accidentally leaked is even a taboo thing to even suggest. The idea
I know.
It has a mythological origin story that it just popped up randomly in a wet market, which is, to me, it strains credulity to believe that, you know.
I know. Although I must say, okay, listen, let's begin before I collapse.
Well, how are you feeling? I just want to ask you, how are you processing this? I don't know how you're in Slovakia, right? Are you in America?
In Slovenia.
Oh, Slovenia. Okay,
no. I mean, Slovenia is south of Austria. Slovakia is north of Austria.
Okay.
We border on Italy on the west and Austria on the north.
Is it a total lockdown in your country, in Slovenia?
No. We have now they are gradually opening up, because I don't know why, but we were probably simply lucky. In the last days, there is maybe one new case per day and so on, but basically it appears controlled. I just noticed how much group psychology is at work, in the sense of how a month ago or more, it was this pure paranoia. You know, you went out, total lockdown. You went out just to a store, everybody avoiding each other with masks and so on. Now, all of a sudden, there is a kind of a relaxation. Most people, they walk on the streets. Streets are not quite full, but nonetheless full. People don't wear masks. They meet. Now, cafeterias are open, at least outside. You can sit on chairs and so on. So it's a strange psychological spin, and it was the same. For example, friends told me in Israel, it was also total lockdown, and then like 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden the whole atmosphere changed. It's not so bad, let's return to some kind of social life and so on, you know.
Right.
But you know what's so interesting? That people are ambiguous towards China, but claim nonetheless, with their brutal lockdown, control of the population, they did it. No? But yes, maybe, we'll see. But the true miracle are those parts of China which don't like China. That is to say, Taiwan and Hong Kong.
Yeah.
They practically canceled it. It disappeared there.
Right.
And they still have at least a certain degree of freedom, democracy, and so on and so on. So you can also do an efficient lockdown and so on in more open democratic societies. But there is one difference, I was told, which make them more efficient. Also, this is why, although they have now small re-emergence, South Korea was doing relatively well till now. Because although you have opposition, political tensions, and so on, but there is some kind of a basic trust between the people and the government. You know, right. It's very important here. Now, it's no time, and I'm saying this as kind of a radical leftist.
Right.
Now it's, no time to play these games of state apparatus, controls us, tools of oppression, all that bullshit, you know. Now we need an efficient state which can be trusted, right. Which should also be transparent and so on, which is why I wonder if you would agree with this. But, you know, many people complain, I don't know, how do you call them, this idea that your cell phones will be tracked and they will track your movements and they will inform you, are you approaching any infected person, or and so on and so on, you know?
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
And some people are afraid, oh my God, it's a step towards totalitarian control and so on. I'm saying quite the opposite. Listen, first, from what I know, from what I'm reading about, let's take 3 exemplary cases. United States, Israel, China. I'm not saying that in other places it's much different, but about these places we know. You know that because of security reasons, fear of terrorism and so on, in Israel, they are doing this already for over a decade. Mm-hmm. All internet, all phone calls are recorded. Of course, you cannot have people to listen to them. So they have computer recognition software programs. They detect immediately if something is suspicious. They follow where you are. In the United States, we learn from all those Cambridge Analytica and so on. So all this total control through digital media is, at least in developed countries, is already going on. Now, when they want to collect a data which I don't consider very confidential, where I move, just this data, and they are raising such a control and so on and so on. I would be much more worried if they were to systematically read my email, listen to phone calls, and so on and so on. As in China, I know, I spoke on phone with a Slovene diplomat there, and I noticed that it's an old lady, was very careful. In China, if you are a foreign diplomat, you automatically assume that it's listened to. You must be careful what to say. So what I'm saying is that I don't see so much, as I wrote in my last text, I think, unfortunately, are you more of an optimist? I don't know that. Even if things will get gradually a little bit better, a certain way of life has finished.
And what is that certain way of life that's finished in your mind?
I think at 3 levels. First, health, certain precautionary measures will remain. I don't think that this virus will simply disappear. Let's hope it will. But now we learn that, you know, there are other viruses which are just waiting beneath the surface. There are other diseases and so on and so on. So we will simply have to adopt a radically new attitude, some kind of a, not even universal as Bernie Sanders wanted, but global health care. It's clear that different states, although when quarantine is needed and isolation we need it, but collaboration, I mean, my God, even Bill Gates emphasizes this. International collaboration is absolutely crucial concerning health. Then, can you even imagine concerning economy? Everybody is already talking about the looming food crisis. You know, I've written about it. Take a state like where things still function, like France. Mm-hmm. They have now spring harvest season. Usually hundreds of thousands of foreigners came there from Eastern Europe, from Spain, and so on to do the job. Now the borders are closed. How to do the harvesting? Right. And they are trying to find volunteers, mobilizing, and so on and so on. Another dramatic point, meat packaging. You know that in the United States you have many infections, no? Right. In meat packaging. In Germany, it is also beginning. So again, how to reorganize this? So not to mention what can happen in Africa and so on. And the third, let's call it, and I don't want to bring them together, not just religious in a narrow sense, but let's call it spiritual aspect of mental breakdowns, depression, and so on. You know, we live in a world, we no longer live in the world in which we were used to live, where you could count on certain basic coordinates, meeting people, socializing, relying on others, and so on and so on. And I think that here, don't be afraid, I attacked when Fidel Castro died, I mockingly called that Cuba had fidelity to castration. I translated Fidel Castro. But something I noticed, like what they had there for totally different purposes of political control. They had there what they call committees of for the defense of the revolution, whatever. But the idea can be used in a different way. The idea is that in every block, part of the city, you have a group of people who not control others in the sense of political control, but this is spontaneously happening. People telling me from Brazil, where state is screwing everything up, in Barcelona and Madrid and so on. You know, people gather a couple of streets, block, and say, okay, let's take control, not in a bad sense, but let's see, where are old, infirm people? How do we protect them? How do we test them? How do we provide for their company so that they don't go crazy? So again, because even if some of them are infected, but somebody still had to provide food and so on. You know, we should never forget this. We know this, but we try to ignore it. We cannot all be in a lockdown, in isolation. For some of us to be in isolation, many things have to go on. Food, sorry for this, something popping up, I hate it. Food had to be delivered, electricity, water, trash, digital network had to function, and so on and so on. So if we take the term of your podcast or what, Holy Spirit, in a more vast sense of a basic solidarity, I always like to quote that passage from Gospels, you know, when they ask him, how will you know that I've returned? No? And he said, when there will be love between two of you, when there is love between two of you, I will be there. I will return there. Something like this. This is the crucial moment for what I like, for what I find really revolutionary in the idea of Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, for me, is another way to say when Christ says, and it should be properly understood, if you don't hate your father, your sisters, brothers, you are not my follower. No, it does. Of course, it shouldn't be taken literally and so on. But the way I read it is that simply there is some basic level of global solidarity, being together, which cannot be reduced to, it's not a matter of family there, it's more a matter of social hierarchy and so on. No? And now I think it's a great moment of this aspect of Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. Now we live, I think, in an eminently, don't you agree, also political moment. You know what I mean by politics, not part politics and so on. But what will be the new world that will emerge?
I think the big other that you talk about, the death of the big other, is what we're seeing continue in this moment, where I take a different approach. I don't think that bureaucracies are going to be able to find these answers. I think as you've illustrated earlier, the scientific establishment doesn't know what's going on. The political coordination.
Know something, and we should rely on them. But I agree with you. Yeah. There are many things that they don't know. Yes.
Right. And I think, like, for example, you mentioned the meat shortages, but the meat industrial factory model was developed for a central planning style way of handling the development and the distribution of meat. And I think that this virus is acting as an apocalyptic moment where we're starting to unveil the failures of, I guess, in that vein of a big other, the failure of central planning, coordinated industrial distribution of meat. Maybe we need to go back to the local farmer. I mean, is that too romantic to you, or
No. But at the same time, you see, what I would like to do is, yes, this return to local farming and so on, because we cannot know how also international transport will function and so on. I read, I like to follow this small news, not the big, apparently small news, that, for example, China itself already fears food shortages. And now they're buying as much as possible what they imported, like soybeans and so on, all that stuff for the next season. So I agree. But at the same time, I don't believe we need quarantines and so on, but I don't believe in bubbles. I think that international cooperation, not in the sense of big centralization, but in the sense of some kind of a sharing the information, coordinating, like you cannot live safely where you live if you know that the symptom is 200 miles away in another part.
Isn't that the market? Isn't that the profane word market that we're all supposed to not like anymore? The coordination of knowledge?
Here I have doubts, because now it brings us to the problematic part, no? Because don't you think, look at how even conservative politicians today look at what they are doing. They are they are doing gestures which don't follow the market rules. For example, even Donald Trump had to give to people checks and so on and so on. This is a form of what we called till recently universal basic income.
Right.
What we discovered is this. Yes, where market is more efficient, we should use the market, because I agree with you. State centralization brings terrible temptations of corruption and so on with it. Things can go terribly wrong. But don't you think that nonetheless, what we need is to rely on state in cooperation with local communities, but also international cooperation, that like some kind of healthcare will function globally. I'm not a utopian here. I'm not saying we will be sending doctors everywhere. I'm just saying of cooperation. We should know what happens next. We should exchange data and so on. Yeah. So global healthcare system had to be strengthened. food has to be somehow coordinated,
Right.
guaranteed. It's good when you say local market and so on. Okay, but what will you do with a big city like New York, my God, no?
Mm-hmm.
The whole eating habits will have to be changed. You can no longer rely probably
There's plenty of beef cattle outside in upstate New York or New Jersey, though. You know, just ship that beef in locally, and the prices will
but
be.
how to feed them? You think? Okay, maybe I don't know. I'm just saying that I don't think, I doubt that simple market mechanisms can, as a basic form of social exchange of commodities, can do with this. These are unconditionals. Again, health, food, then electricity, water supply,
Right.
garbage, and also digital space, internet. Right. This unconditionally has to go on.
Well, it's big.
Without this, we are lost.
It's bigger than the market because it's not all about commodity exchange, but I do think it's in the world of what I would call voluntarism. I think that, for example,
we will need this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for example, let me like, for example, the search for information about what will help us in terms of finding drugs that work. The way bureaucracies work, they de facto eliminate the voices of Galileos that tried to disrupt the paradigm shift, that try to disrupt the paradigm that is the reigning body of knowledge. So my temptation is towards voluntarism rather than state control of medicine, because I believe that Galileos, that means people who say, I totally disagree with the foundations of cancer research, and I think it's this over here, they can't be heard in a bureaucracy by its nature. Bureaucracies work in a sluggish way, in a way that is based on, as Thomas Kuhn would say, the reigning paradigm that has won the past battles of the past. So, for example, I think that the market is the best mechanism, or whatever you want to call it. Voluntary interaction is the best mechanism for curing cancer or curing coronavirus. For example, I'll give you
but okay, let's take this. We all know, and that's good. That's for me good competition. We all know that only in the United States there are dozens of companies investing billions into different vaccines, playing different options. Japan is doing this, China is doing this, South Korea is doing some miracles. In Europe, I think the Swiss and the Germans are progressing and so on. So I agree with you, this plurality should be maintained. I just think that if maybe it will not be one, but a couple of them will be found to work really, not total instant cure, but at least in the sense of alleviating it and so on and so on. That this should be somehow instantly available to as many people as possible.
Well, I think you've touched on a very interesting thought. So here's what I would say about that. I think that the way the governments are structuring medical research, like, for example, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and I'm sure it's similar to other groups, where it requires $1 billion to pass the FDA approval process. And it takes 10 to 15 years for a new drug.
No, that's madness. I know, that's madness, yes.
So what happens is it de facto eliminates any pursuit of knowledge for a solution that can't be patented. And so patents, in my imagination, are from the state. I don't believe in intellectual property in a voluntary market world or market/voluntary interaction. Patents are a fiction of the state. And so the state comes in and they say, okay, we want to help find a solution, but then the incentives they create that you need to spend $1 billion de facto eliminates anything that can't be patented. And here's what you find. What you find is that, for example, I have a friend in Salford University in the United Kingdom. He's the chair of translational medicine there. His name is Michael Assanti. And he has been advocating that people use 2 very cheap FDA-approved generic antibiotics. One of them is azithromycin, and the other one is doxycycline. And he has called for clinical trials to test these generic drugs. The problem is the way the government managed healthcare system is, it is deeply captured by interests that are always going to steer towards something that will be patentable, something that can be stay on patent, because that's where your obscene profit margins come in. Azithromycin cost $1 to make, or a penny to make, and you can sell it for pennies, just a few pennies more. Same with doxycycline. So those are actual drugs that are actually functioning on a market level where they're off patent. That's how it would be in a free market world. You wouldn't have patents creating these obscene profit margins. And doxycycline and azithromycin are extremely cheap, that you would not need insurance, you would not need government care to pay for it. That if you could properly do the research, perhaps we would find out in a free world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but nonetheless, what I fear here is that I agree with you, but the tendency I see is nonetheless to find the vaccine as fast as possible. Don't you think that this tendency will prevail nonetheless? Because if with all the bureaucracy, isn't it clear that our state powers are administration and so on, even health, science, and so on, are in a state of panic. They desperately want to find a solution. Not just for profit, who does it first gets money, but it's a desperate situation, And I think that what you are saying, isn't it nonetheless spontaneously already happening? Local labs are testing this, they are testing this, and so on and so on. And I think everybody is waiting for it, so that if somebody can demonstrate not just that it works 100%, but that at least as it is, how is it called, that South Korean drug? I think it was South Korean, Demseverin or whatever.
Yeah.
Made by a company ironically called Gilead, I think, Republic of Gilead from Handmaid's Tale. Beautiful irony. I think that, again, the desire for a fast solution is so pressing. I'm only more of a pessimist here. What if we will not find a miraculous vaccine?
Yeah, that's why I think it's a big other. We need to let it die. I don't think that's the solution. I think people want they want a one size fits all antidote to the chaos of a plague, and I think that goes.
Here I totally agree with you. We should
that
be.
It's a psychological thing that we want the vaccine more than a scientifically rooted.
I agree with you. It's not just this old leftist image of a good scientist. They have all the answers to ecology or whatever, and then just the bad state wants to regulate. Science itself is perplexed here.
Yeah.
We have to, the scientific big other also doesn't exist.
And I think it's because of the coercion at the heart of state funding of science, which retards the ability for those who are geniuses in science to self-correct. If you don't have competitive pressure challenging the foundations of what you're pursuing, then you don't know what you don't know. For example, let me take the cancer thing. That's an epidemic that continues. And Nixon declared the war on cancer.
Nobody talks about it. That's typical. Probably much more people are at this moment suffering and dying of cancer.
Yeah, maybe you take heart knowing that what happens if your local media were to give a graphic to show you how many people died of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's around you.
Corona
you would be in a you would be in a state of anxiety, much more so if we saw that often visualized for us in the way this virus is. So I think, look at the cancer thing, because that's something that bothers me. I was affected. My family members have been affected by cancer, and it bothers me that we haven't solved this issue yet. But, there's a whole paradigm shift of cancer research that needs to happen, but all of the institutional power is so monopolized by government and its crony allies in the academic world and in the business world that the dissenting opinion does not have the ability to have its information dispersed into the community because of the coercive power of the state. So, for example, here's the way I put it. Knowing what I know, I've seen people like Dr. Thomas Seyfried of Boston College, who talks about therapeutic ketosis as the ability to starve cancer of glucose and starve cancer of glutamine using a non-toxic drug that's also generic, so that's functioning in a market. And he uses these to take on even stage 4 pancreatic cancer as a scientist. He's finding great results. And then again, Dr. Lasanti, my friend in England, he's using these cheap antibiotics that cost $1 or pennies, doxycycline and azithromycin, and they kill cancer stem cells more effectively than chemo, radiation, and surgery. So here's my dilemma, right? Because I listen to my friends on the left and I empathize with them. But for me, I think they're missing how much information and knowledge is retarded by the underpinning of coercion that the state introduces into a subject like cancer research. So in the statist in a state-centered paradigm for the future, my leftist friends would say, isn't it ridiculous? Isn't it obscene that someone might not have insurance and may not be able to have chemo, radiation, and surgery for their cancer? And my answer is, isn't it obscene that we're still using a dark age level of treatment approach? I don't care if it's free, paid for by the government, or I paid for it with cash. Obviously, it's nicer if I didn't have to pay for the toxin, but what if we don't have to have toxins to treat cancer? What if we could use antibiotics and therapeutic ketosis, which is a robust field of research called metabolic treatment of cancer, or what they call mitochondrial health, right?
Do you really think this is so much oppressed? Because, okay, maybe it's an exception, but I know in my own country, Slovenia, and all around, we are bombarded, even in the media, with a little bit of distrust, but nonetheless, we are bombarded with informations about all this, especially of all places from Russia it comes. All these ancient from Siberia, organic treatments against cancer, against this, against that. There is a booming market for that. I think that, I don't know how it is in the United States, but in Europe, there is a space for this.
Right,
and we all the time in the media, there are debates, and I'm well aware, sorry, let me explain. I'm well aware of what we are saying. Once a friend who is dealing with economic, financial aspect of cancer medicine told me, are we aware with chemotherapy, radiation, and so on, what billions, what sums of money are we talking about here?
Right.
There are tremendous interests of how let's give a chance to this much cheaper organic, but nonetheless one should research the efficiency and so on. But I agree with you, the interests, financial interests are tremendous.
Well, think about it. When you have a regulatory body that says, like, I don't know how it is in Europe, but in America, the FDA criminalizes any claim about anything that has not been approved by them. So technically, you cannot say vitamin C cures scurvy because vitamin C has not been through the $1 billion FDA approval process. So therefore, you cannot make a medical claim. You cannot post a testimony of someone that says, I had scurvy, I took vitamin C, now I don't. That would be considered a crime in America. I don't know how it is in Europe. But
you know how it's all a question of linguistics. They allow you just, even in publicity for it, you must just use a little different language to say, maybe it can and so on. If you put it a little bit more conditionally, in a little bit more conditional way, they allow you.
Not if you say, even if you, in America, even if you say may, if you put the word of the substance with the word of a disease, that's considered a crime. So you can say
oh
may,
my God, I didn't,
could,
yeah.
you could say may, could be, should be, might help with, slightly helping with cancer, and that's a crime. That's technically a crime. So that would be a federal crime to do that in America. So what that does is, see, someone that I enjoy voluntary solutions, I look at that and say, my communist friends, look, I can get you a better, like we both agree that we don't like the status quo. But I think if our car is stuck in a mud ditch, we can go this way into more state control to try to fix it, or we can try to reverse and maybe we can get out a little easier if we allowed a little bit more market freedom for people to be able to make claims. And it's not just make claims. When you say that you have to be approved by a central authority to be considered medicine, and that central authority requires $1 billion for you to get approval, that automatically distorts billions and billions of dollars, both in the public and private sector, to pursue paradigms of medicine that can be patented. That's the key issue. They do not, because it's not about, I'm not saying it's a deliberate conspiracy. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying it's a broken mechanism which allows for all medical research and funding for new drugs, new solutions for cancer or diabetes. All of these things flow towards things which can be patented, because that's the only thing that can afford the $1 billion price tag to be considered medicine.
But what I don't
see what I mean?
Yeah, but why are you such a pessimist here with respect to Corona? Because what I see here is precisely tremendous competition. I all the time read. In Germany, they're now testing these drugs. A South Korean company is testing that drug. Even in China, I heard this laboratory is making this experiment test. Even Chinese who really want to control it know that you have to listen to local initiatives and so on and so on.
No, I'm
listen, we will have, sorry, I'm approaching my, stop slowly, sorry, I cannot go on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I appreciate your time. Yeah, I would just say I'm not pessimistic about the outcome of this coronavirus.
Really?
In terms of, I am
not a pessimist. Of course, it's just a limit in the sense of the end of the world, whatever. Yeah. But it's quite possible, okay, now I will follow you, that some kind of a scientific capitalism, in that sense, official science, combination of FDA and big companies will try to monopolize the process and take over. It's quite possible that a new establishment, combination of Johnson & Johnson, other big companies and state administration will use this to strengthen its position.
Yeah.
Here is for me one dangerous outcome, if you ask.
I think there's a reason why big business is more terrified of someone like a Ron Paul than they are Bernie Sanders. I think that democratic socialism is much, much more easier for them to corrupt, because it still maintains a centralized mechanism of state power, rather than a program like a Ron Paul, where you decentralize things and it becomes much harder for them to capture the funnel of medicine information and so forth.
Yeah, but you know what I nonetheless like about, not about centralization, but we need global coordination. Let's say one of these independent labs or scientists invents something and it works. I want it to be known all around the world. You have a chance here, and it should explode, you know. Here we need global cooperation.
Yeah.
Maybe some Swiss company, maybe South Korean, maybe in Taiwan, I don't know where, maybe even in China. They will invent it, and they may be, I agree with you, marginal, but it should become globally known as soon as possible.
Right.
So I think in this sense, not in sense of this bureaucratic coordination, it's crucial. Maybe this form of, yes, local initiatives, competition, and so on, but nonetheless, we should be not in the sense of centralized power, all interconnected, exchanging data, and so on and so on. You know, that's crucial for me.
And I would say the best way to distribute that information would not be to create some kind of state program to make everybody be able to afford the new drug, but rather to get rid of the patent, and allow it to work in a function.
But
like,
aren't you nonetheless not even a little bit afraid that there may also be fake drugs and so on?
Sure, yeah, but that's something that you deal with based on the scientific information. Once you have a fair playing field where money can flow to solutions, not solutions that only can be patented. That's the way medical science works now. It's only towards patentable solutions. Precludes generic drugs and precludes natural things like staying in a state of ketosis, or you know what ketosis is, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, I don't want to take up your time anymore, but it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And we barely got into the Holy Spirit community part, but we touched the surface.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.